Hello again, Neil Petrie here with Free and Equal. Looking today again to talk to Nigel Furness from Hove, Brighton and Hove, and in particular to discuss his experiences with the Communist Party of Great Britain, the Marxist-Leninist branch. Long time ago, but during that time there was talk of a coup that was going to be initiated in his time within the movement. I'd like to cover that today so we can see how the far left do operate, the lengths they will go to, and that Nigel has experience with. So we can then look at that against what's happening today, and also I'd like to look at it in comparison with Nigel's time when he worked in the senior position in the Conservative Party, Nigel Parkinson, Norman Tebbit and Mrs Thatcher, to get an idea of when we're talking far right and their conspiracies versus real conspiracies on the far left. Let's look at that and where that might be today as far as the far left is concerned and its existence within government today and senior positions dotted around judiciary, media, etc. So that's the plan for today. So Nigel, welcome aboard please on the Communist Party of Marxist-Leninist group and their plot back in the day.
Well, it was well contrived, Neil. It was in 1973, and if one looks back at the history books, 1973 was the single worst year for industrial action. This is what brought the government to its knees, and I'm not exactly delighted to say nowadays, but in those days I was delighted to have the power to pick up the phone and ring Jack Jones of the Transport and General Workers Union, and all he would say, "Shall I switch the country off?" And that's exactly what he did. Quite shocking, at the age of 23, quite shocking. He would just send the order to all the power stations, cease generating. And that's when we had they called it they jokingly called it the 3-minute warning, because you'd be sat in a pub, and our local, we weren't very popular in, but I don't think they felt like asking us to leave when the 3-minute warning, the lights would tip 3 times and go on again and 3 times down again. You had 5 minutes to get back home and get everything sorted. The only people whose economy was thriving out of that was Israel, and in particular the Israeli Candle Company. They had massive orders of candles being shipped to the UK. Few people remember that, probably. But be that as it may, nothing could move. I mean, that was the year which we've done earlier on about Ted Heath, deciding to come down, blah-de-blah-de-blah, and he didn't get away for some hours. So the country really was on its knees. But we had at that time, now while we're talking, you mentioned earlier about the media, the far left, and the media. What is their control over the media? Well, it's apart from, with the exception of GB News, I would say their control is total. But they have gained control by the long march through the institutions where they've surreptitiously squirreled themselves into universities, into newspapers, into television companies, into radio, even music. We had a very different strategy. Our strategy was pure Bolshevik. Totally what Lenin brought about in Russia before turning it into the Soviet Union. In other words, a putsch and then an appeal. There has been a revolution. People of Britain, please take to the streets, because this can't continue. The awful Ted Heath government, we mean by that. And we had in place, I will not mention that name, I would imagine he's long since dead, but it was a Canadian gentleman who was the Deputy Director General of the BBC. Everything was lined up for this particular guy to just pull, obviously, the people in the studio. I have no idea how they would have been dealt with, but they would have been, let's put it this way, acquiesced. And Reg Birch, who was the chair of the CPBML and also the chair of the AEF, the old Amalgamated Engineering Federation, would have filled our TV screens and said to the people of Britain and made his announcement, it was all prepared, there has been a revolution, please immediately take to the streets and defend it. Curious, isn't it? That never quite came about. But the Trotskyists, for whom we never had any respect whatsoever, because there were 57 varieties of them, quite frankly, they simply didn't know how to unify in pursuit of their aims. We did. But there's the difference. The Trotskyites have ultimately won through their long march through the institutions. Curious, isn't it?
Well, Tony Blair admitted to being a Trotskyist, after he'd resigned, didn't he? I think it's 2016 or 17.
It was
when he
well
converted
after
to Catholicism.
he
Yeah, so he had to confess, I suppose.
Oh, yeah. Make a full confession.
Yeah.
Plenty to confess.
So, I mean, were there talk of arms? Were there talk of insurrection? And what were they going to do with the military and the police?
Without a doubt. I wasn't high enough to know any too much about that. All we knew was that there was going to be a very robust defence of the revolution.
But these people above you then, because you were quite senior, weren't you? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
I was elevated very, very rapidly because, well, obviously, the various, those who work in Fords and in the various engineering, the manufacturing industries, didn't know how to bring down the country. But this is the key point here, and it frightens the hell out of me now. What I got away with in those days, I got away with by studying up the ESTA code. That stands for Establishment Code in Customs and Excise. Why was I able to ring up and get the power stations turned off? I was the lowest grade in the Port of Shore, Southwark Custom House, but this was the stupidity of the civil service. Lessons here for Nigel Farage, I think, and his Stowage department. All I had to do was to JNF each import and export document, there were thousands of them daily, and rubber date stamp it. And nothing and nobody could touch those forms. That was the way the civil service was arranged, because it was Her Majesty's money. Nothing could move if I didn't do that. And I declared coal black because the miners were on the coast.
Because you were a customs guy, that because you had you had the grasp of one of them
huge
links,
power.
didn't you?
Oh,
in
yeah.
those days.
Oh, yes.
But then, of course, in those days, the unions were much more powerful directly, than they are today. But indirectly, they're almost negated because they've worked their way into the top of the institutions anyway.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Yeah. So today, when you look at, then in those days, very few people were educated at college, university, but now they're going through, nearly 50% go to university, which means a lot more average people go for a start, obviously, in terms of capabilities, but also there's a lot more people being, do you think they're being educated or largely indoctrinated there? What is your feeling from what you have seen in recent years?
My feeling is entirely 100% the latter. I think it's a form of modern day slavery, because Tony Blair and his 50% of people must go to university and be lumbered with huge bills and interest on them to never have a life, quite frankly. And for what? Being taught nothing. Indoctrination, total indoctrination. I'm always proud and always will be proud to say that the only university I attended was the University of Life, and I think it served me exceedingly well.
Well, I think it did, because you ended up working with people like, Parkinson, Tebbit, and, new Mrs. Thatcher. You're working in the kind of policy development. Henry Kissinger, dinner with Henry Kissinger. So this was because you were seen as a rising, influence within the party and were slotted in for an MP's position, which you turned down because you would only basically take a slot near your home. You were definitely, didn't want to be parachuted in. So you're a man of principle, which, comes to a certain extent from your time in the left as well, obviously, that, you are looking towards helping the less, the less well off in life, in all ways of looking at that. So when you look at that time with your time in the head office with the Conservatives, and you look at what might be going on now, how do you see things being run by Labour, when you think of the influence you had there to help start off the Council House initiative, which was, your idea, then how do you see these people in there now and the influence that they've got, and where is it coming from? I mean, we're talking about Labour, or are we talking about much harder left than that, in your opinion?
In my opinion, Labour would never have been able to get away with this if it was not for the traitor, yes, and he can come and sue me for every penny I've got, John Major, who stabbed Mrs. Thatcher between the shoulder blades. A snivelling little creep that she, poor lady, felt she could trust, the only one she could trust. Immediately, he set about dismantling Thatcherism. It wasn't really very difficult after 5 years of an awful Major government. He always likes to get away with this. Well, not on my watch, he doesn't. That enabled the nation in horror. Oh, we have to have rid of those awful Tories. They weren't Tories. They were not whatever else they may have claimed to be. They were not Conservatives.
And when you look at him now, he's joined Carlyle Group. He's a very senior figure in, a very globalist, part of the military-industrial complex type operation, of that type. So, he was obviously a man who could, who was not as, certainly not as ethical as you are in terms of making your choices, in my opinion. And he jumped ship and made a fortune on his departure, and in terms of what you see now with the left's control, it's not doing too well though, is it? It's not going so well. How do you see that working out?
Well, it's not going to work out for them, is it? Their days are numbered. I mean, it's exactly as what I said of the Majorite Tories back in the early 90s. After they lost power for the first time ever in Hove, I was asked by a local journalist, how do you think these people are feeling? I said, don't disturb them. I said, they're dead. But they haven't quite woken up to the fact yet. Same applies.
Right. When you're looking at the international issues as well, and you look at the WEF, the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, who's now under investigation, apparently again, because of his internal fiddles and frauds. That's the allegations that we're hearing. Then in terms of, when you look at how globally, you look at Europe in particular, which we luckily got out of to a reasonable extent, is pushing now for war with Russia, and the machinations that you've got with the economies, and the kind of nosedive that you've got in Europe. Is there any Tory left in Britain, who's in the Conservative Party? Are there any decent people on the left in the Labour Party left?
I do believe there are a small handful, perhaps, of Tories worth having. When I say worth having, I mean worth having in reform. But frankly, I would say, there'll be a mass. I know there'll be an absolute mass of them, all wanting to defect en masse. Let them start on their hands and knees scrubbing the floors like everybody else in this party and like Nigel has had to do. And then, and only then, will they be entrusted. But then, I'm not Nigel Farage, I'm Nigel Furness. That is my view, and that is my advice on the issue. As regards the Labour Party, sadly, I really don't see many, if any, redeeming features. If there were any thoroughly decent people in the Labour Party, they would have come over by now. How dare they claim to represent the working class? At least the CPBML did have noble intentions, but the trouble always with communism is once they get into power, and history has proven this over the last 55 years, once they get into power, it's the old Orwell thing, the pigs with their snouts in the trough, and some are more equal. No, they're the ones who want to tell the working class what to do. They talk about Soviets and deputies and workers' representatives, well, that, frankly, is for the birds.
Now, when we look at the issues that you had as a communist, and then you kind of transferred your allegiance when you saw the Vietnamese boat people, I remember you saying you saw the outcomes of communism in other parts of the world, your mind started changing and you saw Mrs. Thatcher. But in particular, you did not know anything about a Swiss-style democracy at that stage, or what is used in Taiwan and Estonia now as well, and many of the states in the United States for their constitutional issues at the state level. So when you think back to those days, if you'd learned about this system of government where the people have the right to call referendums on laws that are coming out, or can initiate referendums on laws they would like to see instituted, so there's the 1% and the 2% option basically. What would you have thought back then if you discovered this much earlier in life?
Well, I don't think I'd have ever gone down the communist road. Because, thanks to you, Neil, I've learned all that I have about direct democracy. I can't imagine why on earth I'd never heard a dicky bird about it. If that had been around, because at that time, I was young, the young generation today, they have my every sympathy. What kind of a life have they got left ahead of them?
Yeah.
A life of slavery. Now, the more that young people, I'm talking to a lot of young people who say, well, yes, I'd vote for that. Well, you'd vote for that, yeah. First we have to institute it, and then you put forward the ideas. What is it you want? What do you young people think is needed to improve your lives? Then go out and campaign and vote for it. That's far more productive than being sat in dingy rooms by candlelight during all the Ted Heath days and what have you, plotting the night away.
Yeah.
That's my answer.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because obviously it's an institutional plan to ensure that people are not aware of these options to have, a system that has been working for 176, 177 years, whatever now, a long time. But, they're all going to college here, Sussex University, Brighton University or whatever. Are they talking there about this third way? They talk about Blair's third way, but they don't talk about this hybrid, part representative, part direct system. So, it's a pity that getting a toehold, of course, into the university system, which is where it would be ideal to make the point, is just to talk to these people. And of course, unions and national union of students, these types of people are mainly on the far left. But I think if you sat down a lot of hard left people, they would come around to this idea because they'd say, well, actually, they want democracy as well, because that's the magic word, isn't it? The Korean democracies, it's a national whatever, but it's always got democratic in there somewhere, isn't it? The Vietnamese one, North Korea, that's the reality. So in terms of, you're with Reform now, only recently joined them, I think, haven't you?
Yes.
Then you're looking at Nigel Farage. He's been backing this idea as well, hasn't he?
Oh, Nigel's been backing this idea many, many times. Nigel has made pronouncements on this issue. And it's my firm belief that this will be embedded as as things progress. But Nigel is, by nature, it might surprise a lot of people to know, quite a cautious person. Oh yes, he can make the steps, he can say exactly what needs to be done. But I think he's rightly and wisely cautious, because in order to achieve power in this country, in this current loaded situation with the absolutely riddled and undermined leader of all forms, Nigel is not putting a foot wrong. And more power to his elbow in that. There's a lot of people get impatient, And this annoys me, because I understand people are very, very frustrated. There's a lot of anger. People are coiled up like springs. Just stop and think for a moment. Have a little patience. Rome was not built in a day, and anything worth having is worth waiting for.
Yeah, and you've known Nigel for quite some time, haven't you? Was it the early 90s or?
1999 when I met Nigel first.
Yeah.
He came and spoke to us in a hotel we had an organisation called the Campaign for a Better Brighton and Hove. After Nigel, he'd just become an MP, an MEP for the first time in 1999. The irony there is, UKIP had asked me if I would stand for them when I'd stood independently in 1994. I rather impolitely told them what they could do with their proposal, and they got another Nigel F, and the rest is history. But Nigel, yes, yeah, and I did say afterwards, the big three of us in campaign, I said afterwards when Russell, the chairman, Russell, said, well, what do we reckon, guys, after Nigel spoke and everything was gone? That's all I reckon. We've been privileged to have been in the company of a future pioneer. So it just shone. It did, like with Maggie Thatcher, only twice has that ever happened to me, meeting people and you just know that there's something, as like an aura, call it what you want. And there you are, okay, that's 20, how many years later?
26 years.
26 years this coming year. 26 years later, there you are. And touch wood, and thank God, thus far, I'm still alive to see it.
Well, unfortunately, that's still 4 years away. Technically,
No.
I was going to say technically. I mean, what are your thoughts on the current situation and the longevity and the survival chances of Labour for that period when you see what's going on?
I did say 2 years ago, well, 2.5 years ago, that Keir Starmer would win the election, whatever, by a massive majority, whenever it came. But I was convinced then, and I remain convinced now, that they won't last 2 years. It's very hard, easy, too easy, altogether too easy to forget. But they have actually only been in power for 18 months. It seems like 18 years of hard labour for them. Oh, sorry, no pun intended. It's, there is absolutely no way on this earth that they can survive for much longer. I predict that the collapse is imminent.
Well,
imminent.
Yeah, I tend to agree, as you know. Now, looking at Brighton was, famously Tory. You then undermined that, when you broke from the Tories, because they'd broken from what you believed.
Killed them. Yeah.
And then, they then fell to Labour and then eventually Greens, and now we've got Labour back. But in terms of, what you see now, and the radical change that there is across the country and the rise of reform, where are they, do you think? Have you got any surveys or any ideas as to where they stand, Labour currently in Brighton and Hove? And what about reform? Is it the coming force?
Well, an opinion poll, which was flashed 2 days ago, and they just showed a flash on the screen, GB News, of course. An opinion poll showed that the entire whole of Sussex, bar Hastings and Rye, possibly Bexhill and Battle, Kieran Mullen's seat, looked like Chichester. It wasn't on for long, but the entire thing was turquoise. That's all 3 seats in this city. So I confidently predict, a reform council for Brighton and Hove. It's long overdue.
And that's just for Brighton and Hove. And when are we looking at that election exactly?
Well, that election, that's assuming it isn't stolen off us again. That election is down for, in just over 2 weeks' time, we can say it's next year, because it's May 2027.
May 2027.
It's that soon.
Right, okay. But when was it due again?
Ours wasn't altered, luckily, but all the East Sussex, any district and borough elections, and all the county council elections, East and West Sussex, this is where it gets confusing, they were cancelled because of this direct elected mayor, which has now been stolen off the people as well. And if those conniving Tories, and let's put the blame, pin the blame here firmly where it belongs. they've made Labour's job easy for them. Do turkeys vote for Christmas? Do all those East Sussex County Council leaders and West Sussex Tory County Council leaders, do they want to go on for another 3 years? Well, what do you think? And they get nice fat salaries for that too.
Exactly. But you see, it's this very short-term thinking, isn't it? You know, the people are changing. You know, yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of indoctrination, but there's a lot of kickback now amongst the young against that indoctrination, isn't there? Which is why reform has been popular with a large tranche of the younger people coming through, and the dire straits of our economy. Who does that affect most? The young and the ones who haven't got experience. You know, and that's one of the things, of course, with the Swiss system, because it's designed by the people. As you know, they have a fantastic vocational system as part of their education system. It's not just uni, get some useless media degree or something else. Go and learn how to be the best air conditioning guy on the planet, and you'll get 80 grand a year. You're not talking about getting these low-level rubbish jobs and becoming a vegetarian hamburger flipper in Brighton, are you? So that's obviously the thing I'm most interested in seeing. But there's another aspect. Funnily enough, I was just going in my bookshop, and there, what do I find but the Blair the Alistair Campbell diaries. Whilst leafing through it, I see nothing of, not the word Islam's not mentioned in the index, Sharia's not mentioned in the index, Muslims are not mentioned in the index, immigration is not mentioned in the index. But these are all the major issues that have arisen from that period. And that indicates why they have not been dealt with, and have not been dealt with by anybody. So, as you know, there are issues with the genocide case that's going through court, or going to the lawyers in London now, to deal with this issue of Islam, in particular the Sharia, because it's not a case against Islam, it's a case against a particular law code there. Now, when you look across, the West, it's the same issue really, and with this influx of people. When you see those problems that are caused by people who believe that, they can kill people who leave their religion, and they're the only religion that retains such a law, but they're across the West now. And, they're driven by their Sharia exponents, the jurists, the ulamas they're called, or the sheikhs. You'll often hear them referred to as. This is more your opinion. I'm not looking for a political one, but it's just in terms of those issues with regards to the apostates, those who leave Islam, and the lack of protections that they have in this country, and the fact that they were supposed to be supported and protected by the apostate provisions within the hate crime laws. They've never been used since they were implemented in 2007. Have you got any idea why that might be? That's a personal opinion there, Nigel.
Well, my personal opinion is that it smacks rather of the old Soviet communist style. You don't dare leave us, because we'll get you. I believe in democracy. That's why I'm an advocate of direct democracy. I respect all religions. I'm a lapsed Catholic myself. I'm very much a believer. I know there's an afterlife. I respect all religions. I was brought up with my family having come from Northern Ireland, a mixed family, to respect all creeds and faiths, were the actual words that were drummed into me. Anybody that thinks they own somebody, be it a religion, be it a person, that is just slavery, pure and simple. This must not be tolerated in this country. And as for the idea of not Shamana Mahmood, what's his name? Not Cleverly, what's that? Lammy.
Oh, yeah.
Lammy. David Lammy's proposals for a blasphemy act. Hello, have we got into Doctor Who's TARDIS and we've been dragged right back to the Middle Ages? What next? The Spanish Inquisition, I wonder? No. One word covers it.
All right, well, Nigel, you've been very clear there, and I really appreciate your frank opinion, and also, all those points that you've made. As you well know, I am a supporter of direct democracy, and, go around the country trying to help people to understand what it could do for us, in particular for the young, you know, to give them that option to control a lot of the laws, in particular to help them with getting decent education stroke vocational training, so that it's balanced and it meets the needs of the people, not the 50% figure plucked out of thin air by Tony Blair. You know, how is that done? You know, and when you look at Switzerland, they have 75% approval of their system of government. So that's 3 to 1. Now, before Starmer got in, ours was 42%. It's obviously a lot lower than that now. Appreciation of our system of government. Probably, I don't know, probably you're lucky if you found a third of the people supported this form of government. Whereas in Switzerland, with direct democracy, and it's, you know, been bedded in for a long time now, there is massive support. So thank you very much for your time on that, and also your thoughts on the issue with regards to Sharia and the enforcement of apostasy laws, and as you said, blasphemy laws as well. So I think, you know, you're right about seeing the end of this government shortly, and I think you'll also see very large changes with regards to the position of Islam, Sharia, and the, you know, the Muslim population as a whole across the West, not only in Britain. Those are my thoughts. But again, Nigel, thank you very much. You have a long history of, you know, within the political field, and your opinion is much appreciated. Thanks very much indeed.
Always a pleasure, Neil. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.